At 2131 local time, a Ukrainian FP-1 drone the size of a compact car lifts off a rural highway outside Chernihiv and surges into the night sky. Across northern Ukraine, dozens more FP-1 drones are launching from highways, dirt strips, and abandoned fields at the same moment. Unknown to the Russian air defense network, tracking every contact, most of these drones aren't carrying explosive payloads. They're carrying something entirely different, and the FP-1 drones that are armed are racing toward the oil storage facilities at Kronstadt, one of Russia's most strategically important fuel hubs supporting operations in the Baltic. Within minutes, the swarm crosses into Russian airspace. Nebo SVU early warning radars, Russia's VHF band surveillance network that uses radio waves long enough to detect small aerial targets, invisible to higher frequency systems, illuminate across Bryansk and Smolensk oblasts, with dozens of new contacts approaching from the Chernihiv axis. Across 6 more engagement radars, 6 additional crews watch the same outcome unfold. What just launched the Buk M, Russia's medium-range surface-to-air missile system designed to intercept cruise missiles and aircraft at distances of up to 50 kilometers. Its 9M317 missile weighs approximately 715 kilograms, accelerates beyond Mach 3, and costs close to $1 million for every shot fired. Tonight, those expensive interceptors are chasing FP-1 drones worth only around $55,000. And they succeed for one critical reason. Examining the wreckage of the FP-1 reveals a small sphere mounted on the nose, a corner reflector known as a Luneburg lens. This layered plastic and glass device reflects incoming radar energy directly back toward the transmitter, dramatically increasing the drone's radar signature and making a small unmanned aircraft appear far larger than it really is on Russian radar displays. The FP-1, Ukraine's inexpensive, mass-produced, long-range strike drone, constructed primarily from foam and fiberglass, naturally presents a radar cross-section of only about 0.01 square meters, roughly, comparable to that of a pigeon. Attach a Luneburg lens to its nose, however, and its apparent radar signature expands to somewhere between 1 and 5 square meters, making the drone appear almost indistinguishable from a cruise missile on an operator's screen. Meanwhile, the armed FP-1 drones continue pressing toward the oil storage complex at Kronstadt, while Russian air defenses remain occupied, engaging the false high-value radar targets. The Buk crew had no way of knowing whether the radar return in front of them belonged to an armed FP-1 strike drone heading for the Kronstadt oil storage complex or to a disposable decoy carrying nothing more than a radar enhancer. Their fire control radar wasn't designed to identify what an aircraft was made of. It measured reflected energy, speed, altitude, and heading. Any target presenting a radar cross-section of several square meters demanded immediate attention, regardless of whether its airframe consisted of aluminum composite materials or lightweight foam. The computer highlighted every contact the same way, generated the same firing solution, and recommended the same engagement procedure. To understand why that mattered, imagine guarding a fuel depot with only a limited number of rounds. Suddenly, 5 figures emerge from the darkness. Every one of them appears to be carrying explosives, but only one actually poses the real threat. You cannot afford to ignore any of them, so you engage the first target that seems most dangerous. While your attention is fixed on that engagement, the genuine attacker may already be moving toward the storage tanks from another direction. That same dilemma confronted Russian air defense crews protecting the Kronstadt oil depot. Modern integrated air defense systems face exactly this problem. Missile batteries do not possess unlimited interceptor stocks. Even advanced systems must carefully manage every launch because each missile fired leaves fewer available for the next engagement. Replenishing those interceptors requires manufacturing capacity, transportation, and significant financial resources. During a sustained drone raid, ammunition reserves become every bit as critical as radar coverage. Ukrainian planners understood that compelling Russia to expend costly surface-to-air missiles against inexpensive FP-1 decoys could gradually erode the effectiveness of the entire defensive network. A drone costing only tens of thousands of dollars could provoke the launch of an interceptor worth hundreds of thousands or even close to $1 million, creating an economic exchange that consistently favored the attacker. Even if the FP-1 was destroyed before reaching its destination, it had already accomplished part of its mission by forcing the defender to consume valuable resources. The deception extended far beyond simple economics. Radar operators constantly ranked incoming contacts according to their perceived threat. A large radar return flying at medium altitude naturally drew more attention than a small object barely distinguishable from background clutter. By artificially enlarging its radar signature, the FP-1 encouraged Russian crews to prioritize it over smaller contacts, some of which were the armed drones actually pressing toward the Kronstadt oil storage facilities. The confusion spread beyond individual missile batteries and reached higher levels of command. Regional air defense headquarters received dozens, sometimes hundreds of radar tracks from surveillance systems positioned across western Russia. Operators had to determine which contacts represented genuine cruise missiles, which were aircraft, which were FP-1 drones, and which were merely false echoes generated by terrain or atmospheric conditions. A coordinated wave of drones, equipped with Luneburg lenses, dramatically increased the number of convincing high-priority targets appearing simultaneously across multiple radar displays. Meanwhile, the real strike package continued advancing toward the oil storage complex at Kronstadt. Some FP-1 drones carried Luneburg lenses that dramatically increased their radar signature. Others flew without any radar enhancers at all, exposing only their naturally tiny radar cross-section. Some remained at extremely low altitude, disappearing into ground clutter. Others briefly climbed before descending again. Russian defenders were now confronting a mixed formation in which no radar return reliably reflected the true level of danger. The largest contacts could be expendable decoys, while the smallest and least noticeable drones might be carrying the warheads intended for the fuel storage tanks at Kronstadt. Traditional stealth seeks to avoid detection entirely. Radar enhancement attacks the problem from the opposite direction by overwhelming defenders with misleading information. Instead of disappearing from the radar picture, the attacker deliberately fills that picture with contacts that appear far more threatening than they actually are, forcing operators to waste both time and interceptors on the wrong targets. Because the Luneburg lens is lightweight and mechanically simple, it adds very little manufacturing complexity to the FP-1. The increase in radar visibility comes with only a modest penalty in weight and aerodynamic drag, making it an efficient addition for long-range strike missions, where deception can be just as valuable as the explosive payload itself. For the Buk crew, standing beside the burning wreckage, however, none of that engineering mattered anymore. They had detected what appeared to be a cruise missile-sized radar target, followed established engagement procedures, launched an interceptor, and achieved a successful kill. Only after examining the debris would they discover that the missile was actually an inexpensive foam and fiberglass FP-1, fitted with nothing more than a plastic sphere specifically designed to deceive their radar. From the perspective of the engagement log, the battery had performed exactly as intended. From the perspective of the wider battle, the outcome was far less favorable. Every interceptor launched against a decoy was one fewer missile available when another wave approached. Every radar operator concentrating on one convincing target devoted less attention to several smaller contacts advancing from different directions. In modern drone warfare, success is often determined not simply by how many aircraft survive, but by how effectively they manipulate an opponent's decisions long before reaching the objective. The deception was remarkably effective. 8 of the 12 largest radar contacts engaged by the Buk batteries turned out to be expendable. FP-1 decoys equipped with Luneburg lenses. Russia had just expended interceptors worth roughly $8 million to destroy drones whose combined value was only a fraction of that amount. The financial imbalance was striking, but the real loss was measured in rapidly shrinking missile inventories rather than money alone. Inside the Russian sector, Air Defense Operations Center commanders were confronting a more immediate problem. Each Buk launcher carried 4 ready-to-fire missiles. With 3 launchers deployed, the battery began the engagement with only 12 interceptors immediately available. 8 had already been fired during the first 10 minutes against radar contacts that ultimately proved to be decoy FP-1 drones. Only 4 missiles remained, while the armed drones heading for the Kronstadt oil storage facility were still inbound. More than 30 radar contacts still remained on Russian displays, with additional returns crossing the border every minute. The sector commander faced a difficult decision. He could order his Buk batteries to stop firing and preserve their remaining interceptors for whatever followed, or continue engaging every high-priority contact and risk empty launchers when the real attack arrived. He chose to keep shooting. That was exactly the response Ukrainian planners had anticipated. The doctrine of engaging the most dangerous-looking target first was rapidly exhausting Russia's missile inventory faster than replacement vehicles could ever replenish it. While Buk batteries concentrated on the largest radar returns, many of them nothing more than FP-1 decoys fitted with Luneburg lenses, a second wave of much smaller FP-1 strike drones slipped through at barely 200 feet above the ground. Their radar signatures were so small that they received far less attention, while operators remained focused on the larger contacts dominating their screens. The surviving FP-1S crossed the border and continued north toward the oil storage facilities at Kronstadt, penetrating nearly 1,000 kilometers of heavily defended Russian airspace. Flying at approximately 150 kilometers per hour, the journey required more than 6 hours of continuous flight. Their fuel capacity provided only a narrow reserve, leaving little margin for headwinds, navigation corrections, or unexpected detours. Every additional kilometer reduced the already slim chance of reaching the objective. Russian commanders quickly ordered fighter aircraft into the air. 2 Su, 3 5S fighters accelerated from an airbase in western Russia and moved to intercept the incoming drones before they could reach the Baltic region. The Su-35's powerful Urbis E radar could detect fighter-sized aircraft at extraordinary distances, but a small FP-1 flying just 200 feet above the terrain presented a completely different challenge. Forests, buildings, power lines, and uneven ground generated countless radar returns that blended almost perfectly with the drone's weak signature. Unable to rely on radar alone, the pilots switched to the aircraft's infrared search and track system. The gasoline engine powering the FP-1 produced a hot exhaust plume that could, in theory, be detected through infrared sensors. In practice, however, every farmhouse, chimney-moving vehicle, industrial building, and heated structure scattered across the landscape produced similar heat signatures. Distinguishing a single drone from the countless infrared sources below became extremely difficult while flying at high speed through darkness. The lead Su-35 descended toward visual range and opened fire with its 30mm cannon. Hitting a drone traveling at only 150 kilometers per hour required the fighter to slow dramatically, forcing the aircraft close to the lower edge of its safe flight envelope at night. The pilot fired a burst, but the tracers passed harmlessly behind the FP-1 as it continued flying toward Kronstadt, completely unaware that it had just survived an interception attempt. The fighter climbed, turned tightly, and attacked again from a different angle. Once more, the FP-1 remained only a few hundred feet above the terrain, forcing the pilot into another low-altitude dive in darkness. Although the infrared sensor continued tracking the engine's exhaust, the fire control computer struggled to maintain a stable targeting solution as ground heat and terrain interference repeatedly confused the system. Another burst of cannon fire streaked past the drone and disappeared into an open field. The pilot broke away after burning valuable fuel, pursuing a target worth only a tiny fraction of the aircraft itself, while every attack placed an advanced fighter in one of the most demanding flight conditions imaginable. The FP-1 possessed no radar warning receiver, no missile approach warning system, and no electronic defenses whatsoever. It simply followed its programmed route using onboard navigation, entirely unaware that fighters were attempting to destroy it. Ironically, that simplicity worked in its favor. A slow, unmanned aircraft that never maneuvered defensively often proved surprisingly difficult for a high-performance supersonic fighter to engage effectively at very low altitude. The surviving FP-1 drones continued north toward the Kronstadt oil depot, but roughly 20 minutes after crossing the border, another obstacle appeared. Their GPS signals suddenly disappeared. Russian electronic warfare units had activated the POL 2-1 jamming system, a ground-based network designed to overwhelm GPS and GLONASS navigation frequencies with powerful radio interference. Instead of receiving satellite navigation signals, the drones encountered nothing but electronic noise. In a command shelter outside Chernihiv, the Ukrainian operator watches one navigation indicator after another turn red. She attempts to upload updated waypoints to the FP-1 strike drones through the satellite data link. No response. She switches to a backup communications channel. Still nothing. Russian POL 2-1 electronic warfare systems are flooding every available frequency with interference. From this point forward, the drones are completely on their own. relying on onboard gyroscopes and optical terrain navigation, while the operator can do nothing except watch increasingly delayed telemetry scrolling across her display. Without continuous GPS updates to correct its position, the FP-1's inertial navigation system begins to drift. At first, the accumulated error is almost insignificant, but over hours of flight, those tiny inaccuracies compound. After more than 90 minutes crossing western Russia without reliable satellite navigation, the drones have gradually wandered several hundred meters from their planned route over open countryside. That deviation means very little. Near the target, however, it can mean everything. Hour after hour, the FP-1 continues flying through hostile airspace on a small gasoline engine and carefully programmed navigation logic. Occasionally, the glow of distant cities appears off one wing. Far below Russian military airfields and air defense positions remain on alert, their Pantsir batteries scanning the night sky. The drone quietly passes between multiple defensive sites, flying so low and presenting such a small radar signature that it slips through the gaps almost unnoticed. The navigation receiver immediately reports a full satellite constellation. Position updates resume several times each second. The onboard computer accepts the new coordinates and begins turning west to follow what appears to be the correct route, except the GPS data is false. Russian electronic warfare units have switched from simple jamming to GNSS spoofing, transmitting counterfeit satellite signals convincing enough to fool standard navigation receivers. Unlike jamming, which merely blocks GPS and forces the drone to activate backup navigation, spoofing provides what appears to be a perfectly valid position. The drone believes it knows exactly where it is, when in reality, it may be many kilometers away from its true location. The difference is critical. Jamming tells the aircraft that satellite navigation has been lost. Spoofing convinces it that satellite navigation is functioning perfectly while quietly directing it toward the wrong destination. During previous long-range drone operations, spoofed navigation signals caused several unmanned aircraft to drift into neighboring NATO countries, with some crashing after following counterfeit satellite coordinates far from their intended routes. For a moment, this FP-1 appears to be heading toward the same fate. But its optical navigation system detects something unusual. The terrain below no longer matches the stored reference imagery carried inside the drone's computer. A distinctive river bend appears where none should exist according to the newly received GPS position. The onboard vision system compares what the camera actually sees against its preloaded terrain database and identifies the contradiction. The satellite coordinates indicate one location while the landscape clearly indicates another. The navigation computer rejects the counterfeit GPS signal. Trusting its terrain matching system over the satellite data, the FP-1 banks back toward its original course as though the spoofing attack had never occurred. As long as recognizable landmarks remain visible beneath the aircraft, the drone can identify false satellite signals and continue navigating independently toward the Kronstadt oil storage complex. That advantage, however, has limits. When snow, blankets, fields, forests, and roads, the landscape loses many of the visual features the navigation system expects to recognize. Under those conditions, terrain matching becomes far more difficult. If the optical system cannot confidently identify the ground below, the drone may once again be forced to trust the counterfeit GPS signal, allowing Russian electronic warfare systems to gradually pull it away from its intended target. In that ongoing contest between navigation and deception, success can ultimately depend on nothing more complicated than an inexpensive camera and the computer's ability to recognize the landscape beneath it. The GPS spoofing attack had been defeated, but the navigation error accumulated during the earlier GPS blackouts still remained. Before the drone's terrain navigation rejected the counterfeit satellite signals, the prolonged period without reliable GPS had already left the surviving FP-1 drones several hundred meters away from their planned route. They had survived electronic jamming, GNSS spoofing, and repeated interception attempts by Russian fighters. The final layer of defense, protecting the oil storage facilities at Kronstadt, however, would prove far less forgiving. This was not unfamiliar territory for Russian defenders. Previous long-range Ukrainian drone attacks had repeatedly targeted strategic fuel infrastructure around the Gulf of Finland, forcing local air defense units to study the same approach corridors night after night. Russian commanders understood that low-flying drones preferred to exploit rivers, coastlines, and other terrain features that reduced radar visibility, allowing them to remain below the detection horizon of long-range surveillance systems for as long as possible. Inside the Regional Air Defense Command Post, officers had spent weeks analyzing those attack patterns. Long-range systems such as the S-400 could detect aircraft and cruise missiles hundreds of kilometers away at higher altitudes, but a small FP-1 hugging the terrain presented an entirely different problem. Flying just above treetop level, the drones remained hidden behind the curvature of the earth and surrounding terrain until only seconds remained before reaching defended facility. The short-range Pantsir batteries protecting the Kronstadt oil depot had intercepted drones during previous attacks, but their crews repeatedly faced the same challenge. By the time low-flying FP-1S finally appeared on radar, only a few seconds remained to detect, identify, track, and engage them. Recognizing that weakness, Russian commanders had quietly altered their defensive deployment before this latest raid. As the lead FP-1 approached the final approach corridor toward Kronstadt, its onboard systems continued, following the programmed route toward the storage tanks. Suddenly, a powerful radar signal illuminated the drone, not from elevated terrain where medium-range air defense systems were normally positioned, but from a concealed location much closer to its flight path. A Buk M3 battery had been repositioned directly along the expected approach route. Almost immediately, a 9 M317 MA interceptor accelerated from its launcher at tremendous speed. The FP-1 continued flying straight ahead, completely unaware of the incoming missile. It carried no radar warning receiver, no electronic countermeasures, and no ability to perform evasive maneuvers. Seconds later, the interceptor struck the drone directly, destroying it instantly. Before the smoke had cleared, the Buk's autoloader prepared another missile, which intercepted a second FP-1 only moments later. The success of the engagement owed less to missile performance than to battlefield adaptation. Normally, Buk batteries are deployed on elevated terrain to maximize radar coverage across large areas. This commander had done exactly the opposite. Instead of prioritizing detection range, he positioned the system directly inside the low-altitude corridor. The drones were expected to use sacrificing long-range visibility in exchange for an ambush at close distance. With the radar already focused on the most likely avenue of approach, reaction time was measured in seconds rather than minutes. One surviving FP-1 was no longer flying precisely where Russian planners expected it to be. The small navigation error accumulated during the earlier GPS blackout had gradually shifted its route several hundred meters away from the planned corridor. That seemingly insignificant drift carried the drone outside the narrow sector where the Buk radar was concentrating its search. By the time operators realized another target had appeared outside the anticipated flight path, valuable seconds had already been lost. The radar slewed toward the new contact, generated a firing solution, and launched an interceptor, but the geometry of the engagement had changed. Instead of attacking head-on, the missile was now chasing a target, moving away at very low altitude, while trees and terrain repeatedly interrupted the line of sight. The proximity fuse detonated behind the FP-1 rather than directly alongside it. Fragments ripped through the center section of the drone, puncturing the lightweight fiberglass fuselage and fuel tank. Critically, however, the fragmentation pattern missed both the warhead mounted in the nose and the engine located at the rear. Damaged, but still controllable, the surviving FP-1 continued pressing toward the oil storage facilities at Kronstadt, now only minutes from its objective. Fragments from the Buk interceptor ripped through the FP-1's lightweight fuselage, tearing open its fuel tank and leaving gasoline streaming from several holes beneath the aircraft. One control surface is heavily damaged, forcing the drone to yaw sideways as its flight computer struggles to maintain course using the remaining control authority. Yet the engine continues running normally and the warhead remains untouched. The drone itself has no awareness of the damage. Its navigation computer cannot detect pain, assess structural failure, or understand that fuel is rapidly leaking away. It simply follows the programmed route until the aircraft can no longer fly. Ironically, the navigation error introduced hours earlier by Russia's own poll 2-1 electronic warfare system had shifted the FP-1 just far enough away from its expected flight path to spoil the Buk battery's engagement geometry, allowing a missile worth well over $1 million to inflict damage without actually stopping the attack. With only a short distance remaining before reaching the oil storage facilities at Kronstadt, the surviving FP-1s climb slightly above the surrounding terrain. Their optical guidance systems require a clear line of sight to identify the final target area and trees along the approach route partially block the view. As the drones emerge above the treetops, Russian defenders waiting around the depot finally see them. Open source footage from similar drone attacks has repeatedly shown streams of tracer rounds climbing into the darkness as Russian defenders engage incoming unmanned aircraft from multiple directions. Heavy machine guns such as the D-K and Cord, although decades-old designs, become surprisingly effective against a slow-moving FP-1 flying at low altitude. Unlike high-speed fighter aircraft, these lightweight fiberglass drones possess virtually no armor. A single, well-placed round striking the engine, fuel system, or flight controls can immediately end the mission. Several FP-1s are hit during the approach. One suffers catastrophic control damage and crashes before reaching the objective. Another absorbs multiple rounds through its fuselage but continues flying because its engine remains operational and its warhead is still intact. Despite its damaged airframe, the drone continues tracking the heat signature of the Kronstadt oil storage complex, steadily closing the remaining distance. Russian air defenses quickly add another layer to the engagement. A low-flying FP-1 is detected several kilometers from the depot, and a missile launches almost immediately from a nearby Pantsir SMD battery. Unlike earlier Pantsir variants, which carried relatively few standard interceptors, the SMD configuration was specifically adapted to defend against large drone raids by employing a greater number of smaller, less expensive missiles optimized for engaging unmanned aircraft. Every radar and sensor protecting Kronstadt shares targeting information across a unified network, allowing one detected drone to be tracked simultaneously by multiple defensive positions. One more FP, one disappears in a direct missile strike. Even so, several drones penetrate the defensive perimeter. With the target now directly ahead, their onboard optical guidance systems begin the terminal attack phase. Instead of searching for a specific storage tank, the FP-1 identifies the largest concentration of heat within the oil depot. Massive fuel storage tanks, pipelines, and industrial infrastructure radiate enough thermal energy to stand out clearly against the cold March landscape. Once the guidance computer commits to the target, there are no further course corrections or opportunities to abort the attack. Shortly after 4 o'clock in the morning, the first FP-1 crashes into the Kronstadt oil storage facility. Its warhead detonates after penetrating the outer structure of a large fuel storage tank, igniting petroleum products and sending a column of dense black smoke into the night sky. Seconds later, a second FP-1 impacts elsewhere inside the depot, producing another explosion among the storage infrastructure. Then the damaged drone arrives. Fuel continues leaking from the holes torn through its fuselage, and its damaged control surfaces leave it struggling to maintain stable flight. The onboard computer remains completely unaware of the aircraft's deteriorating condition, guiding it relentlessly toward the programmed objective. Barely controllable but still airborne, the battered FP-1 reaches the facility and crashes into loading infrastructure near the waterfront. The explosion ruptures nearby petroleum pipelines, allowing burning fuel to spread rapidly across the terminal and along the surrounding structures. Despite multiple layers of Russian air defense, including long-range radar, Buk interceptors, fighter aircraft, electronic warfare, heavy machine guns, and short-range missile systems, a small number of FP-1 strike drones ultimately reached the oil storage complex at Kronstadt, demonstrating that in modern drone warfare, exhausting a defender's attention and resources can be just as important as penetrating its physical defenses.